Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this Turing Scheme live question and answer session, which is intended for applicants looking at making a further education application for Turing Scheme funding in the 2026 to 27 academic year. My name's Martin, and I work on the Turing Scheme team. I'm joined by a number of colleagues today who will be able to hopefully answer all of the questions that you have for us. What I'll do to start with is just run through some housekeeping. I'll let you all know today's session is being recorded and we're going to publish this on the Department for Education's YouTube channel. So you will be able to refer back to it later, but it also means that the discussions that we have here today will be recorded. So bear that in mind when phrasing your questions. In order to facilitate that, attendee microphones and cameras have been disabled. But what we have on this is a Q&A option where you can ask us any questions that you have. You can submit those throughout the webinar and we will endeavour to answer as many as we can during the session. As I say, please note that your questions will be seen by everyone on the call. So bear that in mind in terms of any personally sensitive information. Any questions that we're not able to answer today, we'll take away to answer by correspondence, or if it's a more detailed one, we might ask you to contact our help desk in order to give them the relevant information. And at that point, I will say, obviously, as you continue to consider your applications, you can always use the help desk, which is via the link that's online on gov.uk, which is starting an inquiry about Turing Scheme funding. That's particularly useful if your inquiry is more urgent, more detailed, or involves personal details, etc. To ensure that this session remains focused on assisting those who are seeking to apply for funding for the academic year of the Turing Scheme, which is coming up, this isn't a forum to address any queries about current 2025 to 2026 projects that are live. Anything about those should be referred to us via the Turing Scheme inquiry form. So this session's for providers who are considering making an application for funding for the next academic year. We've already published an overview of the guidance and application process on gov.uk, and we've added for this year supporting YouTube videos cut into kind of two sections of an introduction for those who are new to the scheme, and also one that focuses on the changes for those who've previously applied who just need to see what we've amended this year. And then for everyone, there's a video on how to apply and what we're going to be assessing for this year. Throughout this webinar, it really depends on your participation. We've already covered the basics in terms of what the scheme offers and how to interact with it on those guidance videos and on gov.uk. So this is very much about answering questions that you have as you're creating your applications for this year's scheme. And we'll keep looking through what you've put in and try to answer, as I say, all or as many as we can. And overall, we hope that you will be able to apply for funding this year and wish you all the best for your applications. Now, what we'll do to start with is my colleague Pete's got a few of the questions that we've been asked already that we can run through to make sure that everyone's seeing the answers on those. And then we'll start looking through the chat. So please do be putting any questions that you have in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. So, hi everybody, my name is Pete. I'm the Policy and Comms Lead for the Turing Scheme. So as Martin mentioned, I'm just going to run over a few things to start with that are questions that we've been asked in advance, and thematic things that have come in through our help desk service to ensure we cover these off and everyone's got the same info at the start. So the first of these is we've had some questions related to the YouTube video on what the categories are of kind of student outcomes and skills that we're looking for this year and where we can find the definitions of these. So we put more guidance this year on the apply for funding page to set out what the student outcomes are that we're looking for. And you can see that there. But broadly speaking, we're looking at transferable skills, so abilities that can be applied in different settings and to support success in study, employment, and everyday life. And there's some more examples on the guidance of that. Intercultural learning and global awareness, so understanding and respecting different cultures and perspectives. Personal development, so growth in independence, resilience, self-awareness, and subject-specific knowledge and skills where relevant as well. So if you look on the Apply for Turing Scheme funding page, you can find some more guidance on those. So another question we've had in advance was whether you can swap students for a member of staff when delivering a project. So it is possible after you've submitted an application to update the profile of students and staff that you propose to send, and that could include swapping a student for a member of staff. But you will need to submit a request to us to do that, and you'll receive more guidance on those processes later down the line. You'll need to also make sure that if you do that, your project is still delivering the aims and objectives that the project applied for, and the ratio of staff that you're sending is proportionate to the number of students that you're sending to. So moving on, we've also had a question on whether we'll be able to move funding between categories when managing a project. And this is something that you'll receive guidance on later down the line. So if you're successful in your application, you'll receive guidance as was the case in previous years on managing your Turing Scheme project. And that will set out the rules for this year on moving money between different categories. So those familiar with this year's scheme will know that there are some ways in which you can move money around and some ways that you can't. So we'll set those out in full if you're successful. So for now, you should plan to make your application using the category set out in the application and plan to stick to those for the time being. In terms of accessing the service and adding an account, so we're aware that, so most of you should have the link to apply for Turing Scheme funding, but we're aware that this wasn't clearly signposted on our apply page. So we're just updating that page to make the link through to the application service clearer. But when you do apply, there are two sign-in routes that you can use. So if you are a mainstream education provider in England, so for example, a school, college or university, your institution should have a DFE sign-in account, which you will use to sign into the service. And therefore, we've got kind of nice single sign-on there and confidence that we're dealing with the right institutions. If you're outside of England or you're not one of those institutions, you'll be able to set up what we call a local account, which will be an account specific to the Turing Scheme service, which won't cut across to any other DFE services. If you have any issues setting that up, you can check in with the help desk to answer any queries on that. And another query we've had in advance is whether you can download a Word version of the application form. So no, you can't. The only Word version of the application form available is the Welsh language guidance, because that has a slightly separate application route. However, I would stress that the questions that are set out in the guidance as they appear in the application service, and also when you go into the application service, you can save your application and come back to it. So you don't need to prep everything in advance and only have one go at submitting it. You can go in and out and update your application before you finally submit it too. So another question we've had in advance is around some people have flagged that when they're making an application, so you'll be aware that in the FE sector, there are limits on the amount that you can apply for. And when you are adding your placements, you can go over the limit when you're adding your placements. We know that's because you might be experimenting with a few different combinations of placements, durations, number of staff, students, trips, etc. However, when you submit this year, there will be a function to prevent you from submitting an application which is over the limit for your type of application. So do be aware of that too. But if you're putting in details of your trips and you see that you can add more, don't worry about that. There is a function in the system to prevent you from doing so later down the line. I did also want to just flag a couple of other things. So I'm sure most of you have been into the guidance for this year, but just a few sort of policy changes that we've already outlined. So in our kind of guideline criteria for the disadvantaged funding for disadvantaged students from disadvantaged backgrounds, you'll notice that we've raised the headline guidance criteria income limit to £35,000. So that's now updated in the guidance. You'll see that too. The other thing you'll notice that we also have some new assessment questions this year. So do go into the apply guidance to see those. Some things are similar to previous years. So there is obviously a strong focus on opportunity. So how are you going to support students from underrepresented backgrounds, from disadvantaged backgrounds, and from students with SEND? a focus on skills, but we've increased and sort of changed how we refer to some of the questions on value for money this year. And there is also no longer an overall project vision session. So more of the word count there and more of the application is focused in on how you'll deliver and how you'll focus in on value for money too. Okay, so I can see we've got some questions now.
Yep. So our first question, do we need to apply for the full 205k?
No, so that's the upper limit, but you can apply for less than that.
Sweet. And the next question, are we able to apply for both Turing and Erasmus scheme?
So the timelines are different. We'll confirm more details in due course about the any future years of the Turing scheme, and more information will be coming out about the Erasmus scheme in due course. But to be clear, the UK's sort of commitment around rejoining Erasmus Plus is for 2027, and this current round of the Turing scheme is for 26-27. So the kind of current periods don't overlap. And then we'll confirm more details about the future of the Turing scheme in due course.
Thank you. Next question, can an accompanying adult join students for only part of a placement? We did not seem to be able to add shorter durations in 25-26. I think that's one for you, Pete.
Yes. So yes, it's possible to for a accompanying adult to go for shorter than a placement. I don't believe it's possible to add that into the system, so it might be worth potentially, if you agree, Caroline, submitting a help desk ticket on how to flag that.
Yes.
You can't. So from a policy perspective, there's nothing to stop you from joining for part of a placement. What I would say is that when you put in, if staff need to swap over partway through a placement, you can't claim for both staff's travel costs. You can only claim for one staff's travel costs over the course of a placement. So if you do choose to swap staff around, you should be aware that if you incur additional airfares or travel costs, you'll need to cover those from your own funds as well.
Thank you. Next question, will there be anyone to assist us with the application this year?
So obviously the help desk is still available to ask any queries. And there is guidance on gov.uk. Those are the two, as is the case in previous years, those are the two channels. But if you've got any specific questions, please do mention this here. And obviously you can get in touch with the help desk for anything that you think needs further clarification.
Okay, next question. I know you mentioned that there is no Word version of the questions and you can save and return to the online form. However, it is very useful to be able to work offline and to work collaboratively with colleagues. Additionally useful to compare side by side with the previous version. Is there any chance a Word version could be produced, please?
One thing I would say, so you can print the gov.uk guidance, or and if you can print it, you can also download it as a PDF, which obviously has all the questions on there as well. So the only thing that would be missing from that would be the boxes, but I will take that away and we'll speak with colleagues and come back on that one.
Okay, next question. Funding should be linked to the student's course of study. Does this have to be subject-specific trips, or can it address an institution priority more widely for skills?
Yes, it could address a broader institution priority, for example, transferable skills. So what we're looking for here is that the placement that you're proposing is coherent and is complementary to students, what the student is studying with you and the broader education that you're providing with them. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a subject specific placement where, for example, you're taking history students to the Acropolis. It could be about developing broader transferable skills, for example. What we want to see is that's coherent with everything else that you're looking to achieve for a student over a course of their study, and it's not just a trip that would be fun that's not aligned to the broader things that you're trying to achieve for that student. So there's a coherent story about what you're trying to achieve for that student across yes, subject knowledge, but also the broader transferable skills and outcomes you're looking to achieve for them, and what you're proposing to do on the placement.
Thank you. Next question. What is the total funding pot for this Turing Scheme 26-27 round? And also, has the pot been split and capped for the type of organisation, for example, schools, FE, HE?
So we can't announce the budget yet. We'll announce that in due course. As is the case in previous years, when we do have that budget, it's likely to be split into specific pots for schools, FE and HE. So we haven't published that budget yet, and we'll publish that as soon as we can. If you look at the data publications for previous years, you can see the ways that we've divided up the budget in the past, which may be indicative to sort of show how we've divided that up between schools, FE and HE pots.
Okay, thank you. Next question. I may have missed in the guidance, but if I have students currently in year 11 signed up who will be in year 12 in summer 2027 when the trip runs, do I need to apply as FE?
Yes, so the rules apply to where the students will be and what they'll be doing in their education when they go on the placement. So yes, if they'll be in year 12 at that point, you'll need to apply as FE if it's only for those year 12 or older students.
Thank you. How will the disadvantaged and SEND percentages be assessed?
So when you put in your application, we will ask you to put in the number of students with a disadvantaged background and the number of students with SEND, and we will use that as part of the calculation that we use when making the very difficult decision to decide which applications to fund, alongside the application score in a weighted formula. There are sort of a few elements component that. So we do look at the overall sort of numbers you're proposing to send, but as part of the application, we'll also assess your proposals for how you will support those students, our confidence that you have a good handle on those students and why those students should be a priority, and how you're going to support them to make sure they can participate fully in the placement as well. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Thanks, Pete. Okay, next one from Pauline. Within the application, it asks for information on the students taking part, but at the point of application, we won't have the exact information. More generally, who will we be hoping to attract from ASN and other groups? Is this acceptable for the application, and will it be scored lower if we cannot provide a high level of detail?
So we do understand that people that that you're planning something in the future and circumstances will change. So it should be about your best known plans at that point in time. So you won't necessarily be scored lower for acknowledging there might be some variation, but we want to see that you've got a good, strong proposal and you've clearly thought in detail about who it is that you're hoping to attract. And we will understand that there may be changes further down the line. If you do need to change things further down the line, what we'd be looking to see is that you're still broadly aiming to deliver the same aims and objectives. Yeah. If that helps.
Thank you. Next question. When colleges have merged and are now 3 or 4 different campuses over 2 different counties, can we submit more than one application?
Probably one that's worth submitting a help desk inquiry for. Apologies, with a bit more detail on the specific nature of the mergers and how that's come about. Generally speaking, you could choose to apply as individual colleges, but it does depend. So I would say, for the avoidance of doubt, if you can submit a help desk inquiry with a bit more info, we can give you a definitive answer on that one.
Okay, next question. Are all previous FE students eligible for participation in Turing FE within the 12 months following their FE course completion?
So, got some notes for us. Yes, and there's no conditionality on you being been on a Turing placement before. If you have been on a Turing placement before, you could still go on a Turing Scheme placement up to 12 months after completing your qualification.
Great, thanks, Pete. Next question. Do you know the funding level at which an external audit report will be required? And then, for example, 40,000. Is there someone on the panel that could answer that?
Yes, 40,000 is the threshold. Anything above 40,000 would require an external auditor.
Thank you, Caroline. Okay, next question. In a previous successful application, I underestimated how many SEND and disadvantaged students I would attract to the project. Double the amount came along in comparison to my estimate. What would you advise me to do in this application? Should I go with my school percentage profile of these students, or should I consider who I attracted last time?
Well, first of all, that's great news that you you got so many more students from those backgrounds coming along. It's very hard to say because only you will know your circumstances and your cohort and what you think is possible and likely. So I'm afraid that's difficult for me to answer because I don't want to give you a steer without that contextual knowledge, unfortunately. But I would suggest that you do think about what you managed to achieve previously, whether your cohort's changed, whether you think that the mechanisms and things that you looked at before would be helpful, and therefore perhaps that might be the best source of evidence. But again, you'll need to think about your own student body a bit more. Apologies, I can't be more helpful.
Okay, next question. As the grant funding to cover living expenses is still reduced to match the school's funding, i.e. £50 to £55 per day, most trips require some sort of contribution from either the college, fundraising, or the students directly. How should we express this in the application and reporting if successful? Will it add to the application score in respect to value for money?
So we don't require you to directly express that in the application or the reporting. So in various circumstances, trips may involve other sources of funding, maybe as a match fund contribution or because they're taking additional students that aren't Turing funded. So we don't need to know the whole financial profile of the trip particularly. You'll find the guidance on the value for money of applications in more detail on the apply guidance. We wouldn't specifically, I don't believe, look for information on match funding in there. So I don't think you need to provide any of that detail in your application, no.
Thank you, Pete. Next question from Adam. What evidence will you use to confirm that the percentage of disadvantaged and SEND learners stated in the application accurately reflects the actual numbers at the point of placement?
So we will look back at the data within the system, and we'll look at the plans within the system to assess that. We, generally speaking, we introduced this approach from Turing 4 onwards, and we'll be publishing some data later in the year, which sets out the actual participation across the piece. But generally speaking, when that data is published, it will show that we generally across the cohort achieve the same or higher proportion of students from disadvantaged backgrounds and with SEND in actual participation as our application.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Are there any plans for the Turing funding for living costs to be increased as it is quite low at the moment?
Unfortunately not. So the grant rates as set out in the guidance will be the grant rates for this year. they won't be made any higher. We do appreciate it's difficult, and it's a difficult balance for us between looking at within a finite budget the numbers of applications that we can fund versus providing setting the grant rates at the right rate. And obviously if we increase grant rates for students, that does decrease the number of applications that can be funded. So no, the grant rates as set out will be the grant rates for this year.
Thank you. Thanks, Pete. Next question. So based on the statement, are all previous FE students eligible for participation in Turing FE within the 12 months following their FE course completion? So based on that, can we take year 13 after their final exams?
Yes, so there's no specific rules around sixth forms around that. So you can complete a placement within 12 months of completing a qualification, and that would include sixth form students as well. So yes, you can.
Thank you. Next, if we didn't manage to attract the amount of SEND students that we pledged to in this year's application, would that affect our next year application?
Generally speaking, no, provided that we're confident that you did everything you could to meet the aims and objectives of the application, and that there were good reasons why you weren't able to meet that. So that's generally not part of the consideration.
Great. Next question. Can we still apply for funding for a preparatory visit if we anticipate some SEND students taking part? And is there any detail around this, minimum and maximum days, for example?
So yes, you could, provided that was a visit that was necessary to ensure that students with SEND could participate in the placement. We don't set specific thresholds for that any longer because they were somewhat arbitrary. We would obviously expect you to ensure that that was proportionate to the things you needed to achieve with a preparatory visit and with the placement that you're intending to go on. So you will need to put details of that into the application, but you don't specifically need to meet a set a threshold. And in principle, a preparatory visit, if it's justified to enable those SEND students students with SEND to attend, that's permissible.
Thank you, Pete. All right, next question from Martin. We would like to organise a thematic mobility which would open to our students, some who are studying at FE and some at HE level. Do we need to submit 2 separate applications?
Yes, so you'll need to make a separate application to the HE stream for your HE students, as there are different rules that apply in HE.
Great, thanks, Pete.
So I think it's back to you, Martin.
Thanks, Pete. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending today's call. We'll leave you with the next steps. Obviously, continue to read and check the guidance rules on gov.uk with the supporting videos on YouTube. Prepare your applications, bearing in mind the advice that we provide on gov.uk and YouTube in terms of writing your application against the criteria. Any help that you need, you can contact the dedicated Turing Scheme help desk. And remember, the deadline is 4 p.m. on the 16th of March 2026. Thank you very much for your time today, and all the best with your applications.